very real prospect of a new world order. The new world order does not mean surrendering our national sovereignty or forfeiting our interests. He took an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States of America. By some, he's been called controversial. How can I convict you when you right away from me each time I come here? They're right against the need to fight my Now, keep in mind that some of my guests have been approached by Homeland Security or FBI saying, why are you going on the Clay Douglas show? My message to those guys, if they're listening this morning, is go get a cup of coffee, maybe you'll learn something. We both took the same ball, to defend the Constitution against all of these foreign and domestic. I don't recall there being an expiration date on that. He is the free American Clay Douglas. That's the free American. Weekdays at 7 a.m. Pacific, 10 a.m. Eastern. Every time I think about it, down in Cincinnati, I'm almost to go. I was down, moved down, guys, up the second. For the podcast and more details, visit www.freeamerican.com or catch the podcast by phone. Hello, this is Michael.
Hello, Michael. This is Clay Douglas. I apologize for if there's any inconvenience, but I have all of my networks up now. All of the computers are rebooted and everything's recording. We just lost a few minutes here, but I've got you now. If you're ready.
I'm ready. I got the phone.
All right, sir. Michael, you were the Libertarian candidate for president, and I've got a little bit of experience with a presidential race. My friend Charles Collins ran for president on the Republican ticket back in 1996, and he didn't fare too well in the Republicans. Every time he got up on stage to tell people we could buy back the Federal Reserve, every cameraman on stage turned their cameras off and pointed them at the ground. Another friend of mine ran for Libertarian, I believe, just last year. He was the governor of New Mexico, Gary Johnson. What year did you make the attempt?
2004.
What?
I ran against.
Go ahead.
I ran against George Bush and John Kerry.
Yeah, you were up against the Bonesman, huh?
I was, and that was part of our campaign. You know, we would mention frequently that I was not a skull and bones.
Well, that's certainly held in high regards by me. Michael, give me a little bit of your background. Why did you, after everything I've seen in here, and I traveled with Charles Collins. I was his driver, his bodyguard, and speechwriter. And I traveled from Maine to California, and I came to the conclusion that our system here, the Republicans and Democrats, are simply two wings of the same bird, and that bird's a global vulture. It's not an eagle. And as long as the media, which I think is the main enemy, I mean, 20 years ago, I started the Free American Magazine, I started this radio show, and I started the militias in the country, and I was demonized and hounded and harassed, and they did their best to silence me. They just, ADL came out and accused me of starting a militia. I said, well, I'm guilty, but they just don't tell you I did it in the governor's office. Governor Gary Johnson was who we worked for.
Interesting.
What did you? What was your background, and why did you decide to get into the presidential arena?
My background was computer programmer and technical trainer. I didn't really decide to run for president. It was basically thrust upon me. I discovered that most of what the government does is unconstitutional, and I began teaching an 8-hour class on the Constitution. Well, another candidate running for office asked me to be a warm-up speaker at a fundraiser. And when I was done with my warm-up, I got a standing ovation. Well, the following day, as I went to work, a friend of mine called and said, we want you to run for president. I said, president of what? He said, president of the United States. And I was dumbfounded. Long story short, I decided that teaching people about the Constitution, the difference between rights and privileges, would be a nice road trip and a temporary delay while I was waiting for the computer industry to recover. And so it was running for president from my point of view was really just a stalling tactic. And nobody expected me to win, and not even me. And so when I did win the nomination in May of 2004, I was probably the most surprised person at the convention. I spent the next 5 months doing interviews, roughly 12 to 16 interviews a day. We spread the libertarian message, and I'm mostly glad that it's over with. It's a lot easier to look back and say that I did run for president than it is to actually do it. It's a lot of hard work.
Certainly is. It certainly is. And every time we'd go into Oakland to set up at the Republican convention, I'd go in the night before, put up signs saying Collins for president. And by the time we got into the arena the next day, all of the signs were gone. This is really, I tell people, I mean, with me, it's real simple. I took an oath when I was 17 years old to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. There was no expiration date on that. And that's what I've tried to do ever since. But if you go into court in America today, the judges will tell you, don't bring that Constitution into my courtroom.
Well, that's because all of the courtrooms in the United States are statutory jurisdiction, which is extra constitutional. It's not explicitly unconstitutional. The Constitution does not forbid statutory law, but it certainly does not encompass statutory law. It's a private law, and basically you're left as soon as you offer a plea, and the system is stacked against you. So most people are really unfamiliar with what law is and what the different jurisdictions are.
You've got a book out that you're working on that you've got out now, and want to tell us about that?
I have two books. The first book is Good to be King. It discusses the Constitution and Bill of Rights. The second book is Secret to Sovereignty, and it explains and outlines some of the personal qualities that we need to have in order to enforce the Constitution.
Look at here. You're not even selling the book. It's available for barter. How to Survive the Second American Revolution. You know, when I saw what happened at Waco with the BATF coming in and murdering 17 little children and their families to save them from a child molester, I thought something had to be done. And I really thought that would provoke a Second American Revolution, but it didn't. What is it? Are the American people just so dumbed down, so cowed, so drugged that they don't recognize what's being done to them? That aren't we being put into pretty much statutory slavery?
We are, and like you, I am stymied. I don't know what the American people are willing to put up with. If you and I had spoken 20 years ago and you told me that there would be a Patriot Act that, essentially eliminated the Fourth and Sixth Amendment, I'd have laughed at you. I would have argued with you that the American people would never stand for that. Well, clearly we have. Then they passed the Military Commissions Act, which eliminates the due process of law. There's another one that's the Homegrown Terrorist Act that basically says anybody like me who's teaching people about the Constitution is a homegrown terrorist. I don't know how much the American people are willing to stand for. And I think that it's a combination of being ignorant, where many people still don't know that a problem exists. But it's also a combination of that and fear, because many of the people who do know that there's a problem are paralyzed with fear, and they refuse to do anything about it other than complain. So we need to, one, teach people what the Constitution really says. And my second book is an effort. I don't know if it'll be successful or not, but it's an effort to try to teach people basically how to be brave, how to have integrity, how to not be submissive to a totalitarian government. Now, I'm not a lawyer. I don't give legal advice. All I can do is tell people what I have done. This is the path that I have taken. And, if you want to follow in my footsteps, you're free to do that or not. But, you have to be willing to enforce whatever law, you propose. If I pass a law that says you're not allowed to think of a black cat, well, I don't know how I'm supposed to enforce that law. Shake my finger at you and threaten you with all sorts of punishment. But even if you're trying to comply with the law, you've got to think of a black cat first before you can draw the circle with the line through it. So, if I were to make a law that says it's illegal to think about a black cat, that law cannot be enforced. It was just physically impossible. Other laws, you have to be willing to enforce it. And, we all claim that the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. We, the people, ordained and established the Constitution. We invented Congress So clearly they're supposed to work for us, not the other way around. Well, if we the people wrote the Constitution, we the people are responsible for enforcing it. And you're not going to be able to enforce the Constitution if you are submitting to all of these government mandates. You know, you fill out your 1040 form every April. You know, you've got your driver's license. You fill out all the government forms they ask you to fill out. You know, when, you know, the government comes to confiscate your guns, you just, you know, put them in a box and hand them over. You know, if you're going to enforce the Constitution, you got to know what the Constitution says. You also have to, you know, have the power and willingness to back it up.
How do we do that? I mean, most of our police force, we've got people like Sheriff Mack out there who fought and beat the Brady bill, but he's organized the Constitutional Sheriffs and Police Officers Association, and if police chiefs join that, some of them have even been raided and closed down by their unconstitutional sheriff. It's you know, you ran on the Libertarian Party, and one of the things I've been telling my audience and people for the last 20 years, actually a lot more than that, because I helped start Normal, I helped start High Times, that, you know, you can be sure that you live in a police state if a man with a badge can come up and say, "What's that in your pocket?" "Whoa, you're going to go to work for IBM for 25 cents an hour after we throw you in jail." And we have made some progress. Medical marijuana is a step in the right direction, but not really the answer, because that's just giving, again, the pharmaceutical industries control over you. You can smoke this if you as long as you pay the doctor. You pay the bribe for the doctor to write you a prescription for something God gave us. When they stole our number one cash crop, billion-dollar crop, as Popular Mechanics referred to it back in the 30s, that was a giant step towards a police state, and that followed pretty directly behind the whole 1913 Federal Reserve Act. We're part of our enslavement, and they turned our most productive, most profitable plant into a drug to make it more profitable to the CIA or Mossad, who are the ones that are flying it into this country under the protection of people like George Bush under Operation Watchtower. I mean, it's like, how do we hope for justice when the criminals are controlling all the branches of the government? And most of your criminals out there, the ones that ought to be put in jail, aren't the ones smoking pot. They're the bankers. They're your congressmen that are facilitating this type of private prison industries. We got more people in jail in America today than they do in China, with 4 times our population.
Well, China has 5 times our population, but you're correct. You know, the United States incarcerates a larger percentage of our population than any other country in the world. We are a police state, and most people are somehow not immune to it, but oblivious to it. I think it was Goethe that said, "No one is more hopelessly enslaved than those people who think that they are free." And you mentioned the Federal Reserve started it in 1913, counterfeiting our money. And it is that printing of money out of thin air which has caused prices to increase. Everybody knows that the price of food's going up, the price of gasoline's going up, the price of everything else that you need to survive is going up. Well, it's not the prices that are going up, it's the value of the dollar. that is going down. And, well, most people seem to be completely, totally unaware of it. They're so busy working 2 or 3 jobs, trying to make ends meet and put food on the table and take the kids to school, that they really don't have time to figure out why their life is so difficult. In December, we celebrated the 100th anniversary of the Federal Reserve. And because people are unaware of the proper mechanism of economics, most people are going to be totally surprised and destroyed when the economy crashes. Not most, but many of the countries around the world are getting ready to do a currency reevaluation and realign their country's currency with gold. And when that happens, the United States is going to be forced to follow suit. I've seen one of the dollars that's supposed to be released here very soon, where the U.S. dollar is partially backed by gold. And there's going to be real economic chaos because the old Federal Reserve notes that most people are familiar with are no longer going to be valid. It's just like, we're going to have to change over to a completely new system, and the exchange rate's not going to be really good. So a lot of people who are unprepared for this are going to be totally surprised and economically devastated.
What effect the BRICS countries are kind of uniting and working together against the whole Federal Reserve notes. I carry around one of Kennedy's $5 bills issued with Executive Order 11110, United States note, and Kennedy tried to do that, and first thing that Johnson did on their plane going back was recall all of that constitutional money. So
I agree.
I mean, here we had a president that was trying to do the right thing, and they murdered him. It's obviously the criminals are in control. Now, as far as answers are concerned, a long time ago, 20 years, 15 years or so, I came to the conclusion that we could change things for the better if we actually went back about 100 years before the Federal Reserve. I said, how did we get by? How did we get by? We were self-sufficient. I came up with a concept called the Liberty Villages concept. And I said, if you grow your own food, non-genetically modified, heritage seeds, and you can generate your own power from the technology we've got, which is solar, wind, you don't need the government for nothing. And almost immediately after I started trying to promote that concept, restoring the self-sufficient family farms, which is really the basis of every civilization, they tried to kill me. They tried to silence me, and they managed to kill the free American. Kind of missed out on me, but not without a lot of expending a lot of effort to do that. And today, we got jackbooted thugs in police uniforms going in and stomping on people's tomatoes that are trying to grow their own food in their backyard. Are they that afraid of us being self-reliant?
Yes, as a matter of fact, they are. I mean, that may sound like a surprising answer, but they do not want us to be self-reliant or independent. They literally want us to be completely and totally dependent on the government. And that's the primary motive of Obamacare. You know, they want everybody to be in this, you know, government-controlled healthcare system. And that way, all of your healthcare will be controlled by the government. And once you're in, they will decide whether you are healthy enough to get the drug. You know, there's an old movie called Soylent Green. Most of your listeners probably don't remember it. But, you know, the general idea is that once you got to a certain age, you know, you were just recycled as food. I don't think that Obamacare is going to do that, but, you know, if you're too old or you got some, you know, terminal illness, you know, the government's going to say, well, you're just really not worth saving. You know, we don't want to spend all this money on your cure. We're going to let you die and spend that money on somebody younger and healthier.
Well, we've kind of been doing that. You know, the doctors made my mother and my grandmother into drug addicts. I mean, I didn't know it. I was about 6 years old. I'd go with them to the doctor, sit in the doctor's office while they went in. They'd come back out. We'd make a stop off at the drugstore and go home. And I didn't realize until I was about 19 or 20 what was happening there until I took one of my grandmother's sleeping pills. Woo! Granny, wow! No wonder you've been stumbling around here eating these Reds. And that's what they've done. They've conditioned us, and I call it. I say they don't call it television programming for nothing. They've conditioned us to warehouse our old folks instead of being able to benefit from their experience, from their knowledge, from their history. I mean, my grandfather taught me how to read before I ever went into the first grade. I could read 1,000 words a minute when I went into the first grade. And you can't do that today. They're putting your grandparents in old folks' homes and hospitals, and they're doing nothing but drugging them. It can't be helping our society, can it?
Well, I don't think so. You know, in years gone by, you know, people would work until the day they died. You know, they were healthy and they were productive, and, you know, then they were lucky enough to die in their sleep with, you know, no major illnesses. You know, you talk about conditioning. I've written a newsletter article, and people can find my articles on my website, constitutionpreservation.org. But I talk about conditioning. When you are 5 years old, you have to do everything that mom and dad say. You got to get permission. When you go to school, you got to do everything that the teacher tells you to do. You got to raise your hand before you can talk. Get a driver's license. You got to do what the police officer tells you. Get out of college and get a job. You got to do everything that your manager tells you to do. You got to get on your knees and beg for a vacation. And so throughout our entire life, we are conditioned to seek permission from somebody we perceive as in authority. And, you know, after, you know, you grow up that way, you know, I don't think Americans are comfortable or possibly even capable of making their own decisions. You know, they're always looking for somebody to give them permission. You know, we want to know, so what does the Supreme Court say? Or if you're in the liberty movement, what does the Constitution say? What does the Bill of Rights? I don't give a shit. You know, I make my own decisions. I have a right to life. Never
TruthRadio.com. The truth is out there.
All right. That's my Truth Radio commercial. We are broadcasting on all of our networks. Crusade, Truth. Still having some problems, I guess, on Blog Talk, but it looks like everything's recording. Everything's working, supposedly. You know, ever since that you mentioned this homegrown terrorism, when that stemmed from I think it was Senate Bill 1959, and that's what they created. They used that bill to create the fusion centers, and the fusion centers under Homeland Security. That's probably the agencies that are involved in all this tapping of our phones. Back in 2004, when I referred to 9/11 as an exaggerated case of Jewish lightning, evidently the Mossad didn't like that, tapped my phone. That was right after the story broke in New York Times about George Bush allowing the NSA to tap everybody's phones. But the NSA farmed that out to companies like Amdocs and Converse, which were Israeli companies. I guess they figured if the Israelis were doing it, it wasn't violating our constitutional rights. Government couldn't be held liable for whatever Snowden has revealed now. But it just keeps increasing. The whole police state, the monitoring, the tracking, it keeps increasing, and it's done so. It's over the last 10 years, 15 years, it's been done so gradually that we just accept it. You know, they can find us anywhere. They can monitor any conversation. Nobody says nothing about it.
And they've brainwashed into thinking that, you know, if I'm not doing anything wrong, I really shouldn't have a problem with that. It's like, I can't believe how docile and submissive Americans have become. Now, you and I both know that if I happen to walk down the street and find some young lady and say, "Excuse me, young lady, would you put your hands over your head? I want to take a naked photograph of you." I have a harassment suit slapped against me faster, before sundown. But every day, tens, if not hundreds of thousands of women go through the airport security, and somebody with a badge uniform says, "Okay, step in here, raise your hands over your head, and we're going to take a naked photograph of you." And these women don't whimper, they don't complain, they just apparently are oblivious to the invasion of their privacy. I don't understand it.
Well, I flew all over the country with Charles Collins, and I haven't, since they set up this whole TSA crap, I haven't been on a plane. I won't get on a plane because I'm not taking my boots off for some foreigner. Not taking them off.
I had just finished going through security in Dallas-Fort Worth, and they make you take all your clothes off, your belt, your boots, and all this stuff, and then your trays get to the end of the conveyor belt, and everything just starts falling on the floor. They don't give you time to get dressed again. So I always pick up my trays, and I just walk into the terminal area, and I sit down in one of the chairs, and, I fill my pockets and get myself dressed at my convenience. Well, I was sitting in this chair, and a young soldier was 5-6 feet away from me. He was in another chair facing me. And we made eye contact, and I told him, I said, I really, really hate airport security. And he was explaining to me that when our soldiers go to Iraq and Afghanistan, we usually fly them on commercial airplanes. They'll fill up an American Airlines or a United Airlines airplane and fly the plane filled with soldiers, overseas. And he told me that the last time he went through security, he said, I had my M16 and 300 rounds to dry pocket knife away. And I said, why? Why did you let them take your pocket knife if you had an M16 and 300 rounds of ammunition? I said, how are you supposed to defend my liberty if you can't even defend your own pocket knife? And the poor guy just looked helpless. I mean, these were ideas that were brand new to him. He really hadn't considered any of that. But, you know, almost all of us going to take all these government infringements for granted.
Again, look, solutions. I want some solutions. Now, I've had a lot of people on this show that have ideas. You know, people like J.B. Campbell said, well, it's just time to start a neighborhood watch. It's time to start a civilian police review boards in your neighborhood, in your county. And I believe with the media control and the whole police state apparatus that they've set up so well, that the only way we can change anything is county by county. How do you feel?
I agree to some extent. I think that it starts with the individual. You have to have personal qualities that most Americans don't have anymore in order to make it all happen. John Adams said that the Constitution is only useful for a moral people, and it is wholly inadequate for any other society. And I don't believe that we have a moral population anymore. Not to say, you know, religious and go to church every Sunday. I'm just talking about, you know, basic morals, the difference between right and wrong. Telling the truth. I think if we had a discussion, everybody would agree that, you know, telling the truth is the right thing to do. But very few people do it. I used to have a Facebook account, and I would advertise my Constitution class. And I would frequently get 30 or 40 people from Facebook signing up and said, oh gosh, we're going to come to Michael's class. And exactly none of the people on Facebook ever attended my class, ever. And so, okay, maybe you live too far away. Maybe you think the class is too expensive. Maybe you think you know everything about the Constitution. Whatever your reason, you've decided that you don't want to come to my class. My question is, if you don't want to come to my class, why would you spend the time to go on Facebook and say that you are? I mean, that's a flat out lie. And you know, everybody agrees that telling the truth is a good thing, but then we all come up with excuses and justifications for why I don't have to tell the truth this time. You know, it would be, you know, inconvenient or whatever. But nobody tells the truth anymore. Nobody has any personal integrity. My own personal experience, you know, I will call and leave a voice message for somebody, and I realize that people are busy. You know, they may not be able to answer the phone. They may not be able to call me back today. But, you know, if I leave a voice message every other day, you know, for a week or two, and the person never calls me back, you know, I find it difficult to believe that you're so busy that you couldn't, you know, like dial the phone or send me a text message or respond in some manner. And then that same person who basically ignored me and wouldn't return my calls will call, you know, a month later, and, you know, they're asking for my help. They expect me to drop what I'm doing and and help them out of whatever situation they've gotten themselves in. That's a pretty big expectation for somebody that was ignoring me. So my book, Secret to Sovereignty, is not a list of ways that you can change the government. The government is really too big, and you all by yourself are never going to change the government. But you do have control over you. You have control over how you live your life. And I give some examples of the ways that people should live their lives. And quite honestly, I know that most of the people who read my book will go, yeah, those are really good ideas, but I'm not going to do it.
Now, let me, your book about sovereignty, a couple of years back, I did a story. I had the wife of somebody on my show that had been going around teaching sovereignty or talking about sovereignty, lecturing on it, and they were murdered. They were killed by cops in, I believe that was Tennessee, around Memphis. And man and his son both killed that just assassinated, death by cop. And then, of course, the ADL got in the branch. They'd already tried to demonize anybody with a constitution, anybody that might be a militia, which is every able-bodied male between the ages 18 and 45 in the country. But then they started demonizing sovereigns. Again, what is this? This is the fear. This is the oldest tactic in warfare to divide and conquer, and they want you to be afraid. I mean, even the Alex Joneses out there talk about the fear, want you to fear the government, but nobody seems to be giving people any answers. I don't want people to be afraid. I want them to grow some balls. I want them to stand up.
Well, that's a part of what my book is about. There's a chapter called Bravery. It follows a chapter called Fear. And I explain that, fear is mental and that you can change the way that you think, learn things you need to know, and you can stop being afraid of something. And the continuation, no longer being afraid is part one, and then being brave about whatever you're doing is kind of a continuation of step two on that same thing. And I don't know how to make people brave. There's no vitamin that you can give them. There's no exercise class they can do, because it is a mental state of mind. And so in my book, I demonstrate, based on personal experiences, things I've done. How did I eliminate fear? How do I represent brave? How do I represent integrity? And these are qualities that Americans used to have. And that's not to say that there are no brave Americans or there are no Americans with integrity. It's just that the percentage of the population that is brave and with integrity is relatively small. And we're never going to change, eliminate the evil in government until we start to change the way we live our lives.
Well, that's kind of what I promoted with the whole idea of the Liberty Village concept. And I've said this isn't really anything new. This is how we settled this country. This is how we domesticated this country. Liberty villages were small towns scattered across America, surrounded by farms, surrounded by ranches. And I've really been advocating getting back to that. I mean, we could even do it in a neighborhood, in one square block in Fort Worth or Dallas or Philadelphia or LA. If we started growing our own food in the backyards, if we worked together in a cooperative effort, what do? What can you make? What can you barter? What can you trade? What can you build a windmill? Can you build solar panels? Can you build a generator, a wind generator, out of a bunch of old 50-gallon barrels cut in half, put on a old axle, leave the brake on it so you can slow it down when you want to? Why can't we? They used to build computers in Taiwan in little shacks. People would get busy and work together and build computers. Why can't we do that? Why can't Americans do that today? Why can't we be more productive? Why can't we build our neighborhoods up? I mean, this whole neighborhood was built on a farm at one time. It was a family farm, or it was a ranch, or it was a grass line where they grazed their cattle. Why can't we go back to that? It's just it's a way of, and I keep, every time I think about that, I can almost hear the song, how you gonna get them back on the farm after they've seen Gay Perry?
Well, Americans could do that, but before they will do that, they have to want to do that. And right now, Americans want everything handed to them on a silver platter. For most of the last 30 years, people come up to me and go, Michael, you know what you ought to do? They have all these ideas on things that I should do to restore their liberty. It's like, well, what are you going to do? Sit around and wait for me to be successful? When I had a heart attack in 2009, I got numerous get well cards. And 60 to 70% of those get well cards, although well-meaning, basically shared the idea that, Michael, you can't die. It's your job and your responsibility to restore liberty. And like, come on, young man, get out of that hospital bed and bring me my liberty on a silver platter. And that's when I started telling people that when I die, liberty is no longer my problem. I'm trying to teach people that liberty is their responsibility. If somebody's trying to hurt you, it's your responsibility to do self-defense. I mean, you can certainly call me to help, but, if I'm too far away, you're on your own. You're going to have to defend yourself. And, and people just have lost that sense of responsibility. They all want to vote for Ron Paul because apparently if we get Ron Paul elected, all of our troubles will be over. It's like Ron Paul is going to be our savior. Well, Ron Paul's a good guy. Ron Paul can't do it all by himself. We, the people, need to do this for ourselves. We need to join together and make it happen. Well, that's going to require some intelligence. It's going to require some integrity. It's going to require a heck of a lot of commitment. And well, I can't do that. I have to go and watch Dancing with the Stars this evening. It's like, really? The founding fathers signed the Declaration of Independence. They dedicated their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor. And you're not even willing to turn off the damn TV. So, if the problems in the United States are not based on the Constitution. The Constitution is written. I'm not the only person who can read the Constitution and recognize that most of what the government does is unconstitutional. The problem is a personal one. It's a psychological one. 310 million people in the United States would rather just sit on the couch and watch TV rather than get up and make the changes that are necessary to restore liberty in this country. They don't want to be politically incorrect. Like, so, I might have to actually do something. Or worse, I may have to confront the government and I could get hurt. It's like, well, that certainly doesn't sound like, life, liberty, and, our lives, fortunes, and our sacred honor. The American founding fathers were all in. Failure was not an option. Give me liberty or give me death. And today, people are going, oh my gosh, I gotta sign up for Obamacare. Why? Well, because if I don't sign up by March 1st or April 1st, they're gonna, give me a fine. Like, okay, well, that sounds, much like a slave to me.
Well, I've said that they have refined the art of slavery to the point the slave don't even know they're slave. I'm not a slave. I can get in my pickup and go get a beer. Watch. It's called economic slavery.
It is. And people are totally unaware.
It's that kind of brings the question to mind. Have they just been? I've really tried to understand this. People sit around and say, well, we need to elect somebody. We need a leader. Well, there are leaders out there. I've started a lot of movements. I helped stop the war in Vietnam. No Gulf of Tonkin incident. I went out and sold peace symbols. I put peace symbols in Kmart's and Walmart's and Spencer's Gifts. I helped start Normal. I started this whole medical marijuana. I financed Jack Harrow while he was writing The Emperor Wears No Clothes. And again, we made progress, but I'm just one man. I started this radio show. Started the militias around the country again. J.B. Campbell was probably the first. And yet, do this radio show every day. It's up on YouTube. It's up on Facebook. It's up on, it's archived on Blog Talk Radio. All you got to do is it's archived on my website. And my phone rarely rings. I noticed that you even put your phone number up on your website or your books. How often does your phone ring? How often does somebody other than a talk show host like me pick up the phone and call you? I don't get any phone calls. I don't get any phone calls and get very few donations. Yeah, we'd like for you to save us, Clay. We'd like we like the guest you have on. But nobody wants to back me. Nobody wants to buy my gas so I can go to conferences so I can speak to a few hundred people, a few thousand people.
Well, I agree. I get very few phone calls asking, how to buy the books. But I do get lots of phone calls asking me, how do I travel without a driver's license? How do I, carry a gun without a permit? How do I, and the common denominator between all these calls, whether they say so or not, is they want me to generate some kind of paperwork that they can mail to the government and make the government go away. As if the government is going to respond to some kind of paper you send them. They don't understand that, people in the government lie, cheat, steal, and murder. And, there's no piece of paper that you can send them that's going to make the government go away. It just doesn't exist. So the bottom line is that you've got to be prepared and willing to defend yourself from the government. In the German Holocaust, the Jews were being dragged out of their homes at 2 o'clock in the morning. Who was that? Were they drug gangs? The Crips and the Bloods of the local hoodlums that were doing that? No. The people dragging the Jews out of their homes were police officers. They were part of the government. And knowing the Germans, I'm sure their uniforms were, pressed and crisp and clean and all good looking. Unfortunately, many of the Jewish people decided, well, I don't want to cause any trouble. I'll go along peacefully now, and hopefully I'll get an opportunity to resolve it in court later. Well, we know how that worked out for many of them. It didn't work out at all. And so, I'm not advocating violence. I don't think that, we should turn around and start, murdering government officials. But you do have a right to self-defense, whether the person trying to murder you is a member of the government or not. Just because a man has a badge and uniform, that does not give him the authority to beat people up, take their wallet, does not give him the authority to rape women. And, if I were General Lee, I would either kill or whoever the perpetrator of the lies. Even if that perpetrator was in uniform. So, it's all a matter of philosophy. You have a right to self-defense. And nobody disagrees with that concept philosophically. But when it comes right down to, okay, I'm getting ready to pull the trigger to defend myself, you go, well, you can't do that. Why not? Why am I not allowed to defend myself? And unfortunately for everybody else, I'm the one that makes that decision. I don't ask permission from anybody. I don't get permission from the government. I have a right to life. I will defend my life. You want to talk about it? Fine. I'm happy to talk. But if I don't have a gun and the police come for me, I go, oh gosh, I want to talk about it. They'll throw me down, put handcuffs on me, probably taser me a couple times, and drag me off and do horrible and despicable things to me. And then, all I wanted to do was talk about it. However, if they come to arrest me, and I go, gentlemen, I have a gun, and I know how to use it, and I'm willing to use it. All of a sudden, they want to talk. Well, gosh, let's talk this over. Let's not get violent. Like, okay, I'm happy to talk. In fact, that's what I wanted to do in the first place. I don't need the gun in order to shoot people. I need the gun in order to, influence the conversation a little bit.
It's these latest scandals here, the Sandy Hook in particular. We don't even know if anybody was ever killed at Sandy Hook, but they wanted to take your guns. Are all these just propaganda moves? Is this psychological warfare or what?
I don't get any secret information. I can't make any statement for sure, but, I'm well aware that Sandy Hook could have been a completely contrived situation. I've watched videos that were fairly convincing, indicating that nobody that it was all just. There's an old movie called Wag the Dog. Most of your listeners may want to watch again.
Dustin Hoffman, yes, sir.
Yeah, where they invent a war. No war ever took place. It was all fabricated in the media. So it's possible that the Sandy Hook tragedy never physically occurred and was totally a fabrication by the media. Well, it doesn't matter to me. It doesn't matter if Sandy Hook was a figment of somebody's imagination or if, 27 people really did lose their lives. It doesn't matter because I'm not giving up my gun. The people who want me to give up my guns are trying to use emotion. It's like, oh my God, see how terrible this was. We've got to collect all the guns. Well, collecting all the guns doesn't solve the problem. What it does is it makes it possible for that problem to proliferate and happen everywhere else. The director of the NRA got up, and the recommendation was that the principal and teachers, be trained, to carry a pistol. And they laughed Wayne Lapierre off the stage. It's like, oh my God, that's so ridiculous that doesn't even dignify a response. They acted like, he was criminally insane. Well, let's analyze the situation. One group wants to have no guns in school. You want to wait until the students are killed and murdered, and then, after the students are killed, you're going to call for the SWAT teams to show up with what? Semi-automatic rifles and 30-round magazines. The heroes in this crazy story are carrying the same weapons that you don't want anybody else to have. Okay? Now, in my version, the teachers, and the principal are carrying guns. They're capable of physically defending their students. And so if someone does come in and it's possible that one or two students might be killed at the beginning, that's how you know that there's a reason to defend them. But you have one or two students killed, and then the perpetrator is killed. So your death count at the end is significantly smaller. And I believe sincerely that if it's widely published that the teachers and principals are carrying, they are armed, and they know how to use it, that nobody is going to go in there attempting to hurt anybody. Nobody seems to be afraid when a police officer walks into the room. Well, if he's a police officer, he's carrying a gun. You're not scared or terrified by the gun that the police officer is carrying? And most people are not. Why? Well, because the police officer was trained. Well, okay, you want to spend, all that tax money to hire enough police officers to stand at the door? Or it would be much cheaper, much easier, much more efficient to let the teachers carry their own damn gun. And in that case, the students don't die. They are protected. You got people there with guns to protect them before they get killed, instead of waiting until after the students are shot and killed before you send, SWAT teams in, to do it's too late. After the horse leaves the barn, it's too late to close the barn door.
Everything you say makes perfect sense. It's called common sense. But why do we get so much resistance to logical thought. Why aren't people, you make sense. Gary Johnson made sense when he was running for president for the Libertarians. Very few people even knew who Gary Johnson was. They didn't know who you were. Because they weren't told on television. If television, the thing that really frustrates me is Americans donated about $1 billion to the Republicans and Democrats the last election. Where did that money go? Well, it went to the Republican Party. It went to the Democratic Party. Where did it go from there? It went to the media companies who only told you about people that were willing to work for the bankers, the people that were willing to work for the New World Order, as George Bush described it. We didn't know about you. We didn't know about Gary Johnson. You didn't know about Charles Collins back in '96 because the media didn't tell you. And this is the reason I started the Free American and this radio show from the beginning, was because they weren't telling you they weren't telling you the truth. They wanted you to believe that somehow the BATF had to go in and kill 17 little children to save them from a child molester. The media is as much of our problem, and the Rothschild family bought Reuters News back in the 1800s. Somebody there, and they brag about the Jews owning Hollywood. Somebody owns these television, and it's corporations. So it ain't Jews, it ain't Muslims, it ain't Christians. Pick a religion, we'll find a way to demonize it. That's part of the divide and conquer. I started the Free American and this radio show because I think that's our only answer, is to be able to set up the ways to compete with them to get the truth out to them. The Bible tells you the truth will set you free. And they certainly don't want you to know the truth about this system, which is really slavery disguised, is it not?
It is. But one of your questions a long while ago is, why doesn't logic work? And it's because the American population has been dumbed down. They wouldn't recognize scientific evidence if you beat them with it. They don't know how to think logically. They're manipulated by emotion. And, we don't say this is the right answer because I can prove it. It's, this is the right answer for me because I kind of feel like it. I like that as the answer. Well, okay, but that's a really poor way to survive.
Now, you also talked about in your book here and in some of the things that I've been reading that you wrote, you talked about the Chinese. You talked about the Chinese are subordinate and subservient to their government simply because they think they should be. And the Chinese population is waking up a little bit. And what we see happening over in the Ukraine and Crimea right now with the Russians, what exactly happened to communism? What happened with the Cold War? I mean, that was I've told people that the Russian people were never our enemies, and I don't believe the Chinese people are our enemies. And maybe the reason the Chinese are doing so well today, and maybe the reason Russia doesn't quite seem like the bad guy today that the movies try to tell us, the Russians are coming, the Russians are coming. Be afraid, the Russians are coming. The Russians were never our enemies. The Cold War was a farce the same way that Vietnam was a farce, the same way that Iraq was a farce, in my opinion. Have the Russians and the Chinese, after being under communist rule for almost 100 years, have they finally woke up and what's wrong with America? Don't they realize that every plank on the Communist Manifesto is intact in America today? Every.
No, they don't know that. That's one of the subjects in my 8-hour class, and everybody is so stunned that we let break off in order to let it sink in. We live in a communist country, and I prove it, and that proves to be a little disturbing for those people. Like I said, they got to stand up and walk around a little bit, and it's difficult to swallow.
I volunteered for Vietnam, 1964. I was 17 years old. I was ready to go fight the communists. Teach me weapons. Let me go. Cut me loose. Put me in the special forces. But then I started reading, and I realized that on the Communist Manifesto, abolition of private property, heavily progressive income tax, abolition of all rights of inheritance, confiscation of property of all immigrants and rebels. What's that you got there? Is that pot? Oh, we're going to have to take your car. We're going to have to take your home. Central bank. Number 5, central bank. Government control of communications and transportation. Government ownerships of factories and agriculture. Number 9, I love corporate farms and regional planning. Can you say Agenda 21? And government control of education. I call it the public school system, Michael.
Well, that's the most important plank in the Communist Manifesto, because if the communists can train our children while they are young, they will be less resistant to totalitarian systems when they grow older.
And they've been pretty successful at that, and that's all put on by the same people that own the banks, the same people that own the oil companies. And our founding fathers warned us about that. They said, Thomas Jefferson said, if you ever allow a private bank to issue your money, the banks and the corporations that spring up around them will leave your children homeless in the land we conquered. The only thing I can't quite determine is that seems like a perfect description of fascism to me. So if every plank on the Communist Manifesto is intact, what are we, communist or fascist? Or is that just two wings of the same bird once more?
Well, yeah, it's the same thing, only different. It's evil. You lose your life, you lose your property. Whether you're shot or stabbed, you're still in trouble. You just got to decide which one is worse. They both interrupt your life.
Yeah, by the way, I think hammers kill more people than guns do, so hammers and knives. Let's go back here. What can we do? People can sign up for your class. People can get your books. You are selling your books, under the barter system, and you're taking silver. You want to get silver for your books.
Right. Well, the first book, Good to Be King, I do accept Federal Reserve notes. You can mail me a check and I'll mail you a book. The second book is a little bit more advanced. It's not for everyone. In fact, in the preface of the book, I let people know that, if you're, eager to sign up for a driver's license and fill out your 1040, and you want to do everything the government tells you to do so you don't get in trouble. The book is not for you. Put the book down, look furtively in all directions, to make sure that nobody saw you reading this book, because from your point of view, this book is contraband. This is potentially volatile information. It's certainly going to be controversial.
Do we have any hope? Is the Libertarian Party, does that extend any hope, or is that simply a distraction for activists? I mean, that's people have asked me, well, Clay, is there a militia I can join? Is there a militia I can join? Well, if you want to join a militia and you haven't known, and there's more than 10 people in it, and you haven't known all of them your whole life, one of them is probably a Fed trying to set you up. I mean, go ahead.
Well, I don't waste any time with politics anymore, because I am convinced that the elections are rigged and predetermined. There's no way for an honest, liberty-minded candidate to win. All you need to do is look at Ron Paul's most recent attempt at president, and you can see how he was, abused. All of his supporters were threatened and intimidated. I think in the Iowa caucus, he came in second, and the mainstream media talked about first, third, and fourth place. I mean, where have you ever heard somebody talk about the Indianapolis 500 and they don't mention the guy in second place at all? I mean, it's ridiculous. So, we need to take personal action. Like I said, my book doesn't explain how you go out and change Washington. It's more about how you change yourself. How are you going to change the way you live your life so that you can be prepared for all the things the government is about to do?
Well, what they have done to me, they've tried to destroy me financially. They've taken away advertisers. They've taken away everything that worked 10 years ago. Doesn't work today. I published magazines. I had 20,000 copies every month that I put out into the major bookstores and the major outlets. I can't do that today. I had one of my companies sold for $500,000, and I still retained half of it. Publicly traded company. We signed the papers on Thursday. They put a press release out on Friday, and Monday I walked into the office and the CEO is white and shaking. Can't do it, Clay. Can't do it. I can't go through with it. They're threatening to impeach me. They're threatening my stocks dropping like a rock. If I do this deal with you, I'll lose everything. How do you oppose something like that when they've removed your base? You're not advertising with him, are you? We won't be able to shop here anymore. We're going to tell all of our friends not to shop with you because you're supporting a racist. You're backing a racist. You're backing an anti-Semite. You're backing a patriot. Oh, bad guys. And this is the media again that demonizes us. Even Hollywood, you want to go see a Steven Seagal movie, watch him fighting the Patriots. They're portrayed as the bad guys.
Well, more people have to have the courage of their convictions. We've got to stand up for what's right. And not necessarily keep ourselves politically correct.
You know, during the Revolutionary War, the support for the Patriots came from the churches. Today, the churches have got a Masonic cornerstone run by Illuminati, so they're a 501c3 corporation, so they can't talk about politics. They can't recommend Michael as a presidential candidate, or they lose their tax exempt status. And to me, I've told people I did a film on it called "No Such Thing as the New World Order." I said the money changers that Jesus ran out of the temple are still with us. They just changed the name of the temple. They call it the Federal Reserve of the Bank of England now. So nothing's really changed over 2,000 years. But the churches aren't telling you about it. The churches aren't telling you what Jesus said about the Jews who say they're Jews but are not, or of the synagogue of Satan. Probably a pretty good description of the Zionists in Israel that are killing off the true Jews, the true tribes of David. I think they call them Palestinians now. What's happened to our religion? And I'm not sure. The Catholic Church has been. I've had people on the last few months that have really been super critical of the Catholic Church, saying the Catholic Church is the Antichrist. And I don't have a lot of problem believing that, because why would you, if you think Jesus is the Messiah, why would you worship the instrument of torture that they used to kill him on? What's happened to our religions? What is it all distraction? Is this all about control? I mean, I believe in God. I believe God, is alive and well on the internet today. I mean, burning bushes are kind of passe in the 21st century. And we ought to have a direct access to him. I think they call it a soul, don't they? Or a conscience, or ESP.
Well, people need to have the courage of their convictions. If somebody with a badge or uniform can walk up to you and you voluntarily stop whatever you're doing because you respond to somebody that you think is an authority, then the game is over. The game is over when you became submissive. The game was over when you stopped thinking for yourself. The game was over when you became unwilling to defend your own life. And, what I've been doing for the last 30 years of my life is trying to teach people the difference between rights and privileges, teach people the proper role of government, and teach people basically how to be brave. You got to stand up. You got to do what is necessary to achieve liberty. And again, unfortunately, most people are not willing to do that, even when you give them the answer.
You're right. It's the term pops up in my mind. I have met the enemy, and he is us. What you're describing there. I mean, I first of all, I don't believe in, sin. I don't believe we're born into sin. I believe we're born. We know good from evil, even as a child, without any training whatsoever. You know if you're doing something right or if you're doing something wrong. You know. That's instinctive in us. And yet most people want to turn their head. They don't want to. They don't want to face it. They don't want to face the idea that these people that they look at as an authority figure might be doing something wrong. Talking about the police, talking about the preachers, talking about the politicians, talking about the judges out there. This is a corrupt system. They have turned it into a corrupt system over there, and they've refined it over 100 years. Have we gone too far? Is it beyond hope that as you said, our founding fathers told us, or the people that came to America early, talking about the Constitution working for moral people, and if you're allowing people to go to prison because they were smoking a plant, I mean, you're not being moral anymore. You vacated your morals. You've turned your head to injustice. Have we gone too far? Have we gone too far? Is there no turning around from
well, if the question is, can we restore liberty? The answer is yes. Yes, we certainly can. We established liberty for the very first time, when we wrote the Declaration of Independence. There was no precursor. There was no example for us to live by. We basically wrote the Declaration of Independence and said we're not going to, play by the King's rules anymore. That was a much more difficult task because, nobody had known it or believed it beforehand. Our job is not to invent liberty, but to restore it. The Declaration's been written. The Constitution's already on paper. All we got to do is live up to it and enforce it. When I ran for president of the United States, my mother asked me, if you think the general public is ready for your radical ideas? And my response was, they're not my radical ideas. They're Thomas Jefferson's radical ideas, Patrick Henry's radical ideas. All I did was dust them off and translate them into slightly more modern language. I just like the Declaration of Independence when I read it. I've never claimed to be smart enough to write it, but I encourage your listeners to go to the internet and download a copy of Frederick Bastiat's The Law. It's a short pamphlet. Shouldn't take you any more than 2 hours to read the whole thing. And it explains the fundamental basis for why we wrote the Constitution in the first place. And, I can teach people who are willing to learn, but I cannot force ideas into anybody's head. If people don't want to learn, if they don't want to stand up for their own freedom, there's very little I can do about that. I make the information available. I'm willing to answer people's questions, but once I answer their questions, what they do with that information is up to them.
I like what you wrote here. Let me share this with you. Before Phil over there says, let's change the channel, Marge. I've heard enough of this. Does the FDA really have the authority to prevent you from drinking raw milk? Does the federal government really have the power to force you into health care insurance you don't want or can't afford? Are you really going to stand there and submit to mandatory injections or passively accept the universal RFID chip under your skin? If so, this book is most assuredly not for you. Close the book. Now look furtively in all directions to make sure nobody saw you holding this book. You're already a slave, and you shouldn't get caught reading objectionable literature as this.
Mainstream media won't tell you. At Truth Radio, you can listen live or listen to a large selection of archived programs. TruthRadio.com. Your truth is out there.
All right. All right. We're out of here. I think I'm out of time here. Michael, thank you very much for being with me.
My pleasure. I enjoyed it.
All right, sir. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Hello.
Let me ask you a question. What if I can show you how...